House Stark of Winterfell is the principal noble house in the north and one of the great houses of Westeros. For thousands of years, they ruled as kings of winter, until Torrhen Stark bent the knee to Aegon the Conqueror, becoming Wardens of the North instead. Their seat at Winterfell is an ancient castle built over natural hot springs, with walls that have stood for 8,000 years, according to legend. The castle's design is deliberately practical rather than beautiful, built for withstanding the harsh northern winters with its thick granite walls and covered bridges between buildings. Their sigil shows a grey direwolf on a white field, and their words, "Winter is coming," serve as both a warning and a statement of constant preparedness. Unlike the more optimistic house words of southern houses, the Starks chose a reminder that hard times are always approaching. This perfectly captures the northern mentality of perpetual vigilance and self-reliance. The direwolf connection runs deeper than just heraldry. At the start of the series, Eddard Stark finding 6 direwolf pups, one for each of his children, was the first time direwolves had been seen south of the Wall in 200 years. This supernatural connection suggests the Starks have some ancient bond with these creatures that goes beyond normal animal companionship. The Stark bloodline carries several distinctive traits. They tend to have long faces, grey eyes, and dark brown hair, what's called the look of the North, or the Stark look. Their rule is characterized by harsh but fair justice, demonstrated perfectly when Ned Stark beheaded a Night's Watch deserter personally, following the old northern tradition that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. This hands-on approach to justice earned them fierce loyalty from their bannermen. The North is massive, roughly the size of the other 6 kingdoms combined, yet it's also the most sparsely populated region due to its harsh climate and shorter growing seasons. The Starks manage this enormous territory through a network of bannermen who maintain their own keeps and lands while owing fealty to Winterfell. Their history is steeped in legend. Brandon the Builder, possibly the same Brandon who founded House Stark, is credited with building Winterfell, the Wall, and Storm's End, suggesting the early Starks had access to knowledge or magic that's been lost. The crypts beneath Winterfell stretch deep into the earth, containing generations of Stark dead, with the oldest sections so ancient that the names have worn off the statues. Tradition holds that iron swords are placed across the laps of the dead kings to keep vengeful spirits in their tombs. According to Stark tradition, there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, a rule that's held for thousands of years with only a few exceptions. Breaking this tradition seems to coincide with terrible events befalling the family. During Robert's Rebellion, Rickard Stark and his heir Brandon were brutally executed by the Mad King Aerys Targaryen, leaving Ned Stark as the unexpected Lord of Winterfell. This event fundamentally shaped the current generation of Starks and set in motion the events that would eventually lead to Robert Baratheon taking the Iron Throne. The Stark words prove prophetic throughout the series. Winter literally comes in the form of the White Walkers and their army of the dead, an existential threat that the Starks, through Jon Snow, are among the first to recognize and prepare for. Their ancient knowledge about the Long Night and the others turns out to be crucial survival information rather than just old stories. House Bolton of the Dreadfort is the second most powerful house in the north, and holds a dark reputation that stretches back thousands of years. Their seat, the Dreadfort, sits on the banks of the Weeping Water in the Eastern Hills, and its very name tells you everything you need to know about the family that built it. The castle's design emphasizes intimidation with its formidable walls and the flayed man banners that fly from its towers. Their sigil is a flayed man on a field of pink, and their words, "Our blades are sharp," are a barely veiled threat that references their ancient practice of flaying their enemies alive. The Bolton history is soaked in blood and cruelty. For thousands of years, the Boltons were bitter rivals of the Starks, fighting a series of wars where both sides committed terrible atrocities. The Boltons were known as the Red Kings, and they practiced flaying not just as punishment, but as a form of terror warfare. They'd wear the skins of their dead enemies as cloaks, a practice so horrifying that even in a medieval society it was considered beyond the pale. When the Starks finally defeated them and forced them to bend the knee, the Boltons were forbidden from flaying their enemies, though they clearly never forgot the practice. The current Lord Bolton keeps his flaying knives well maintained in a special case, a not so subtle reminder of his house's traditions. Roose Bolton is described as having pale eyes, the color of dirty ice, and there's something fundamentally unsettling about him even before he commits his worst betrayals. He speaks so softly that people have to lean in to hear him. He never raises his voice, and he has this disconcerting habit of not blinking. Some maesters have noted that he regularly leeches himself, claiming it keeps his blood pure, which is either medieval medicine or something far more sinister, given the hints about the Bolton bloodline potentially having some supernatural longevity. His son, Ramsay Snow, later legitimized as Ramsay Bolton, represents everything terrible about House Bolton distilled into one person. Where Roose is cold and calculating, Ramsay is sadistic and impulsive. He takes personal pleasure in torture, hunting human prey with his dogs, and psychologically breaking his victims. His treatment of Theon Greyjoy, transforming him into the broken creature called Reek, showcases the depths of Bolton cruelty. The Boltons command significant military strength in the north, with the Dreadfort's garrison and the levies from their bannermen making them second only to the Starks in terms of raw power. This strength, combined with their reputation for ruthlessness, made them dangerous even when they were technically loyal vassals. Their strategic position in the Eastern Hills gave them control over important roads and the ability to quickly mobilize troops. The Red Wedding represents the culmination of Bolton ambition and treachery. Roose Bolton conspired with Tywin Lannister and Walder Frey to murder Robb Stark, his mother Catelyn, and most of the Northern Army during what should have been a sacred wedding celebration protected by guest right. This violation of one of Westeros's most fundamental laws shocked even hardened lords and earned the Boltons eternal infamy. After the Red Wedding, the Boltons were rewarded with Winterfell and named Wardens of the North by the Iron Throne, but their rule was built on fear rather than loyalty. Most northern houses secretly despised them and remained loyal to the Stark cause, even when it seemed the Starks were extinct. The Boltons' grip on power was always tenuous, because they never understood that northern loyalty isn't won through terror alone. Ramsay's marriage to Sansa Stark was an attempt to legitimize Bolton rule by connecting to the Stark bloodline, but it backfired spectacularly. Instead of binding the North to House Bolton, it gave the northern houses a Stark to rally around when the time came to revolt. House Manderly of White Harbor is unique among the great houses of the North because they're not descended from the first men, but from Andal adventurers who arrived in the North roughly 1,000 years ago. Unlike most Andals who conquered their way into power, the Manderlys were refugees fleeing the Reach after backing the wrong side in a succession crisis. The Starks gave them land at the mouth of the White Knife River, where they built White Harbor into the North's only true city and its primary seaport. Their castle, called the New Castle to distinguish it from the older fortress in the city, sits on a hill overlooking the harbor with its thick white walls earning the city its name. Their sigil is a white merman with dark green hair, carrying a black trident on a blue-green field, perfectly representing their maritime power and their control over the North's sea trade. Their words, "True to our word," might seem ironic given Lord Wyman Manderly's later scheming, but it actually reflects their historical loyalty to House Stark, the family that gave them refuge when no one else would. This debt has shaped Manderly politics for a millennium. The Manderlys brought Andal culture with them to the north, including the Faith of the Seven, making White Harbor one of the few places in the north where the new gods are widely worshipped. They also brought literacy, trade connections, and shipbuilding knowledge that transformed White Harbor from a fishing village into a proper city. The new castle contains a sept, a rarity in the north. and the city has its own unique culture that blends northern hardiness with southern sophistication. White Harbour's wealth comes from its position as the North's primary port. Ships from the south bring luxury goods, wines, and silks that northern lords can't produce themselves, while northern goods like timber, furs, and salted fish flow south through White Harbour's docks. The Manderlys take a cut of all this trade, making them one of the wealthiest houses in the north, despite not having the largest territory. They can also raise significant naval power, with enough ships to transport armies or blockade enemy ports. Lord Wyman Manderly is described as enormously fat, weighing over 300 pounds, and he plays up the image of a jolly, gluttonous lord who cares more about his next meal than politics. But this is deliberate misdirection. Behind his jovial exterior, Wyman is one of the sharpest political minds in the north, playing a dangerous game of pretending to submit to the Boltons while secretly working to restore the Starks. When the Boltons demand Manderly loyalty, Wyman plays along, even going so far as to allegedly kill and butcher Davos Seaworth to prove his allegiance. But this is all theatre. He keeps Davos alive and hidden, while simultaneously plotting the downfall of House Bolton. His famous speech about the North remembering, delivered while eating a massive pork pie, reveals his true loyalties and hints that he may have baked 3 missing Freys into the pies he's serving at Winterfell. The Manderlys lost Lord Wyman's son Wendell at the Red Wedding, murdered alongside Robb Stark while under guest right. This personal loss, combined with their ancient debt to House Stark, made Wyman absolutely determined to see the Boltons destroyed regardless of the personal risk. His willingness to pretend submission while plotting rebellion shows that sometimes loyalty requires deception. House Umber of Last Hearth is one of the most powerful houses sworn to Winterfell and holds the distinction of being the northernmost major house, with their lands extending right up to the wall itself. Last Hearth, their seat, is a grim fortress built to withstand wildling raids and the brutal winters that hit the far north harder than anywhere else in Westeros. The castle's name itself suggests finality, the last hearth before the true wilderness begins. Their lands are harsh, yielding tough people who fought wildlings for generations and developed a reputation as some of the fiercest warriors in the north. Their sigil shows a roaring giant in shattered chains on a field of red and white, one of the most aggressive house symbols in Westeros. Unlike many houses that chose elegant or mystical symbols, the Umbers picked an image of raw strength and the breaking of bonds. Their words, unknown in the books, don't matter as much as their actions, which consistently demonstrate loyalty to House Stark and absolute ferocity in battle. The Umbers are known for their size. Multiple members of the family are described as giants among men, towering over normal people with builds to match. This isn't just poetic description. The Umber bloodline genuinely seems to produce men who are significantly larger than average, leading to speculation about giant blood somewhere in their ancestry, especially given their sigil. The Great Chun, Lord Jon Umber, is one of the most memorable Umber lords, a man so huge and fierce that when he challenged Robb Stark's authority early in the War of the Five Kings, Robb's direwolf Grey Wind bit off 2 of his fingers. Instead of taking offense, the Great Chun laughed and declared Robb his king on the spot, becoming one of his most loyal and effective commanders. This incident perfectly captures the Umber mentality. They respect strength and directness, and once they give their loyalty, it's absolute. The Umbers brought a significant military force to Robb's cause, with thousands of warriors who fought with characteristic ferocity throughout the war. They were present at many of Robb's victories, and their size and fighting prowess made them valuable shock troops in battle. The Great Chun himself survived the Red Wedding only because he was too drunk to be easily killed, fighting off multiple Freys even while severely wounded. After the Red Wedding, the Umbers faced a difficult situation. With the Great Chun captured and held prisoner by the Freys, His son Small John had to navigate between his family's traditional Stark loyalty and the new reality of Bolton rule in the north. Different Umber factions took different positions, some secretly remaining loyal to the Stark cause, while others appeared to accommodate the Boltons out of practical necessity. The Umber's position right on the wall gave them unique challenges. They dealt with wildling raids more frequently than southern houses, and they had first-hand knowledge of the threats beyond the wall. When Jon Snow allowed the wildlings through the wall, this created tension with houses like the Umbers who'd spent generations fighting them. This conflict between old grudges and new necessities would complicate northern politics even after the Boltons fell. House Karstark of Karhold traces its lineage directly back to House Stark, making them blood relations to the ancient kings of winter. About 1,000 years ago, a younger son of House Stark was granted lands northeast of Winterfell and built Karhold to defend against raiders from the sea. Over the centuries, the name evolved from Stark to Karstark, but the family never forgot their origins. Their lands in the northeastern hills are harsh but defensible, and Karhold itself is a strong castle built to withstand both military sieges and the brutal northern winters. Their sigil is a white sunburst on black, the colors inverted from House Stark's white field, symbolizing their connection to, but distinction from, the main Stark line. This shared bloodline meant the Karstarks were among the Starks' most reliable bannermen for centuries, with family ties reinforcing feudal obligations. Their words are unknown in the published books, but their actions historically spoke to their loyalty to their Stark cousins. The Karstark troops were known for being tough, disciplined fighters who'd proven themselves in numerous conflicts. Lord Rickard Karstark was a loyal bannerman to Robb Stark at the war's beginning, bringing several thousand men to fight in Robb's cause. He had 3 sons, and when 2 of them were killed by Jaime Lannister during his captivity, Rickard's grief and rage began to consume him. This personal loss would eventually lead to one of the most consequential betrayals of Robb's campaign. The breaking point came when Rickard, maddened by grief and frustrated by Robb's refusal to execute Jaime Lannister, took matters into his own hands. He and his men murdered 2 young Lannister squires who were prisoners at Riverrun, boys who had nothing to do with his sons' deaths. This violation of the laws of war and guest right put Robb in an impossible position. Robb was forced to choose between family loyalty and justice. Despite Catelyn's pleas and warnings from his advisors that he couldn't afford to lose the Karstark forces, Robb executed Lord Rickard himself, following the Stark tradition that the man who passes the sentence must swing the sword. This decision was legally and morally correct, but strategically disastrous. The Karstark forces abandoned Robb's cause, leaving him significantly weakened heading into the endgame of his campaign. The execution created a permanent rift. Harold Karstark, who became Lord after his father's death, bore a grudge against the remaining Starks and ended up allying with the Boltons out of both practical necessity and lingering resentment. This demonstrates how even ancient bonds of blood and loyalty can be shattered by the harsh realities of war and the cycle of revenge. The Karstark situation illustrates one of the central tragedies of Robb Stark's campaign. His decision to execute Rickard Karstark was the right moral choice, but contributed to his strategic downfall. It shows how the Stark commitment to justice and honor, while admirable, can be a liability in the brutal Game of Thrones, where more flexible lords might have found a compromise that kept the Karstark forces in play. House Mormont of Bear Island is one of the smaller but most respected houses sworn to Winterfell. Bear Island sits off the western coast of the north in the Bay of Ice, a harsh, cold, and relatively poor island constantly threatened by Ironborn raiders who see it as easy plundering. Despite limited resources and a small population, the Mormonts have built a reputation as some of the toughest and most loyal people in the north. The island's isolation and constant danger from raiders has forged a culture where even the women train as warriors out of practical necessity. The famous saying that Mormont women are tougher than men from other houses isn't just boasting, it's demographic reality when half your fighting-age population is away fishing or serving in larger wars. Their sigil is a black bear on a green field, representing both the literal bears that inhabit their island and the fierce, protective nature of the family itself. Bears might seem less impressive than direwolves or giants, but they're powerful, resilient, and dangerous when cornered, just like House Mormont. Their words, "Here we stand," are simple but profound, reflecting their refusal to be moved or conquered despite the constant challenges they face. This stubbornness in the face of overwhelming odds defines the Mormont character. The island itself is not wealthy, the soil is poor, the growing season is short, and resources are limited. But what Bear Island lacks in gold, it makes up for in the quality of its people. Lord Commander Jean Mormont of the Night's Watch came from this house, as did his son Jorah, who fled into exile after being caught selling poachers into slavery. This exile brought shame to the house, but Gior and his niece Maegay worked to restore the Mormont reputation through service and loyalty. Mage Mormont ruled Bear Island as Lady of the House after Gior joined the Night's Watch and Jorah fled. She's described as a tough, no-nonsense warrior who personally fought in several of Robb Stark's battles. She had 5 daughters, all taught to fight, continuing the Mormont tradition of warrior women. This matriarchal bent to House Mormont makes them unique in Westeros's generally patriarchal society. Lyanna Mormont, though only 10 years old when Jon Snow and Sansa Stark seek her support, instantly becomes a fan-favorite character for her fierce loyalty and refusal to be intimidated by anyone. Her letter to Stannis Baratheon, declaring that Bear Island knows no king but the king in the north whose name is Stark, perfectly captures the Mormont spirit. When she does commit her forces to Jon and Sansa, she brings only 62 men, but those 62 fight, worth 10 times their number. The Mormonts punch above their weight in every way. Despite their small numbers and limited resources, they've produced a Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, multiple renowned warriors, and some of the most quotable declarations of loyalty in the series. Their commitment to House Stark never wavered even when it seemed the Starks were extinct, showing that true loyalty isn't about backing winners, but standing by your principles. Bear Island's position off the coast makes it strategically important for controlling the western waters of the north. Despite constant Ironborn raids, the Mormonts maintain a small fleet and enough maritime power to discourage full-scale invasion. Their sailors and fishermen are as tough as their land-based warriors, having to deal with the brutal waters of the Bay of Ice. House Glover of Deepwood Motte holds significant territory in the Wolfswood, the vast forest that covers much of the western north. Deepwood Motte itself is an unusual fortification for the north, built in the style of the First Men with a wooden palisade and a tall timber keep, rather than the stone castles favored by most major houses. This wooden construction makes it vulnerable to fire but allows for quick repairs and expansion, and its position deep in the Wolfswood provides natural defensive advantages from the surrounding forest. The Glovers have held these lands for thousands of years, serving as loyal bannermen to House Stark and managing the timber resources of the Wolfswood. Their sigil is a silver fist on a scarlet field, symbolizing their martial prowess and their reputation as dependable warriors. The mailed fist represents both defense and offense, the ability to hold firm against enemies and strike back when necessary. Their words are unknown, but their actions consistently demonstrate loyalty to the Starks and efficient management of their forested domain. The Wolfswood is one of the North's most valuable resources, providing timber for construction, fuel, and shipbuilding. The Glovers manage this resource carefully, understanding that their wealth depends on sustainable forestry rather than short-term exploitation. Robert Glover served as Master-at-Arms at Winterfell under Eddard Stark, a position of trust that showed the close relationship between the houses. His brother Galbart Glover led the Deepwood Motte forces in Robb Stark's campaign, proving to be a capable commander. Both brothers demonstrated the Glover talent for military leadership and administration. The Glovers suffered significant losses during the War of the Five Kings. When Asha Greyjoy and her Ironborn raiders seized Deepwood Motte, the Glovers were driven from their home and forced to seek refuge with other northern houses. This occupation was particularly humiliating because the wooden castle proved vulnerable to the Ironborn's aggressive assault in ways a stone fortress might not have been. The loss of their seat created a personal crisis for the family and demonstrated the vulnerability of even well-defended positions when facing determined attackers with surprise on their side. Stannis Baratheon's forces helped retake Deepwood Motte from the Ironborn, driving out Asha's garrison and restoring the Glovers to their lands. This created a complicated political situation where the Glovers owed a debt to Stannis but remained loyal to House Stark. Their response to this dilemma shows the pragmatism that successful northern houses must employ, accepting help from unexpected sources while maintaining their core loyalties. When Jon Snow and Sansa Stark sought support for retaking Winterfell from the Boltons, Lord Robert Glover initially refused, citing the losses his house had already suffered and his exhaustion with endless wars. This refusal, while disappointing to Stark loyalists, makes sense from his perspective. His people had fought and died for Robb Stark, lost their home to Ironborn raiders, and barely recovered before being asked to fight again. His caution reflects the reality that even loyal bannermen have limits. After the Battle of the Bastards, when Jon defeated Ramsay Bolton and retook Winterfell, Lord Glover came to bend the knee and apologize for not joining the fight. His speech about the North remembering and his declaration that he would stand behind Jon Snow as the White Wolf shows that his earlier refusal came from practical concern rather than disloyalty. Once Jon proved victorious, Glover immediately returned to the Stark fold. House Reed of Greywater Watch is unique among the major houses of the North in almost every way. They rule the Neck, the swampy region where the North narrows to connect with the southern kingdoms, a landscape of bogs, quicksand, and shifting waterways that's nearly impassable to outsiders, but home to the Crannogmen who've adapted to its challenges. Greywater Watch itself is a moving castle, built on a floating island that drifts through the swamps, making it impossible for enemies to find or attack. This mobile fortress perfectly represents the Reed approach to survival, adaptation, and evasion, rather than direct confrontation. Their sigil shows a black lizard lion on grey-green, representing the dangerous predators that lurk in the Neck's waters. Lizard lions are like alligators, ambush predators that seem calm until they strike with devastating force, much like the Crannogmen themselves. Their words are unknown, but given their military tactics and the nature of their homeland, something about patience, cunning, or unseen danger would fit their character. The Crannogmen are descended from the children of the forest, or at least heavily influenced by them, making them ethnically and culturally distinct from other northerners. They're generally shorter than other people of Westeros, rarely exceeding 5 feet tall, but they're incredibly skilled at navigating their swamp homeland. They fight with guerrilla tactics, using poisoned weapons, nets, and ambushes rather than facing enemies in open battle. Lord Howland Reed is one of the most mysterious major lords in Westeros, despite playing a crucial role in recent history. He was Eddard Stark's closest friend, and the only other survivor of the fight at the Tower of Joy, where Ned rescued his sister Lyanna. Whatever Howland saw at that tower, he's kept secret for decades, making him the only living person besides Ned who knew the truth about Jon Snow's parentage. His continued silence on these matters suggests a deep understanding of the dangers this knowledge represents. Howland sent his children, Mira and Jojen Reed, to Winterfell to pledge loyalty to the Starks and fulfill a mysterious purpose related to Jojen's prophetic Greenseer visions. Jojen's ability to see the future and Mira's skills as a warrior and protector proved essential to Bran Stark's journey beyond the Wall. The Reeds' commitment to protecting Bran, even at the cost of Jojen's life, demonstrated their absolute loyalty to House Stark. The Neck serves as the North's first line of defense against southern invasion. Any army marching north has to pass through this treacherous landscape, where traditional military advantages become liabilities. Large forces bog down in the swamps, supply lines stretch and break, and the Crannogmen harass invaders with poisoned arrows and sabotage. This makes conquest of the North extraordinarily difficult, even for larger southern kingdoms. During the War of the Five Kings, Robb Stark left Howland Reed and the Crannogmen to defend the Neck against any southern advance. They successfully held this position, making it impossible for Lannister forces to attack the North directly. This defensive success came at minimal cost in Reed lives and resources, showcasing their tactical brilliance in using terrain to maximum advantage. The Reeds represent a different kind of power than other northern houses. They don't have large armies, wealthy lands, or impressive castles, but their specialized knowledge, unique abilities, and control over crucial strategic terrain make them invaluable allies and terrifying enemies. Their loyalty to House Stark has never wavered, and their role in Bran's transformation into the Three-Eyed Raven suggests they'll remain important to the North's future. The North was never unified by ambition or conquest. It was bound together by memory, by blood, and by the understanding that survival demanded loyalty above all else. Each northern house served a purpose shaped by the land itself. Some guarded roads, some held ports, some watched forests, swamps, or frozen shores. None ruled in comfort, and none endured without sacrifice. When war came, honor did not always lead to victory. Justice carried costs. Betrayal reshaped destinies. And even righteous decisions fractured alliances that could never be repaired. Yet the North endured because its people understood what others did not. Power fades. Names fall. But those who remember their duty, their history, and their place in the land are never truly defeated. In the North, survival is not a triumph. It is an obligation passed from one generation to the next.